What's going on, everybody? I am the Bat Otter, and today I'm going to be reviewing the first volume of Berserk, the deluxe edition that's being published right now by Dark Horse. If I'm correct, there are 10 of these out at the moment. I don't know if they're going to continue to publish them currently, because obviously Kentaro Miura is dead. He died last year, I think it was, and Berserk was still going, so each volume has 3 of the original Japanese publications in them, which you can actually get those as well from Dark Horse, the smaller individual volumes that are paperback, which are just English translations of the Japanese copies. I think these are exclusive to America. I could be wrong, but yeah, as you can tell, it's a pretty big book. I like the deluxe edition printing. Obviously, I've reviewed some JoJo books from Viz, I believe it is, and they are also formatted in the deluxe edition kind of style, although they're smaller than this, but they are hardcover. This feels like a fake leather, as though it's supposed to be leather. Binding, so it's really cool. It's really thick. The binding is really good because it is the I don't know what they call it, but it's this binding where you open up the book. Let me open up the book, and as you can see, it opens up. It's all bound to the string or the fabric. All in all, the book itself, in terms of production quality, it's a really good one. The pages are also printed very well. They're not cardstock, but they're also not super skinny, so you could just see through them. Oh, wow, that's that scene. So yeah, all in all, as a book, and not necessarily in the contents, just as a book as a whole, you're definitely going to like this. You're probably not going to deal with many dents in the spine because of the way that the book unfolds here in the binding. And especially for its size, again, this is upwards of, I mean, actually, we could just check, I believe 700 pages, if that's anywhere. There it is. That's just, hold on. It's a big book, what can I say? There it is. So, it's, okay, not 700 pages. It's around 500, 600 pages, because after Volume 3 starts, there's still some more after that, and that's 459. So yeah, before we begin, though, be sure to follow my Instagram, where I post all of my artwork, all my updates on things that I sell. And if you're a human being, I know you like stickers, so you should definitely buy the Bat Otter stickers. They're only $5. You can DM me on Instagram. I'll get them mailed out to you wherever you live in the United States. And yeah, so buy my sticker. They're great. Trust me, you could put them on your car, on your laptop. I have one on my phone. You just can't see it because that's what I'm using to record. But definitely get yourself one of these. Anyway, so into the review. Going into Berserk, I went in blind. It's the first thing that I really went in blind with, other than the guy kills monsters and he has a big sword. And I heard that it's pretty dark. And I'm like, okay, everybody, this is dark. It's a pretty messed up book. And it starts off as such as well. So I'm going to be reviewing it in the 3 different, in the multiple story arcs, because the first one is the Black Swordsman arc. I believe that one's labeled here as well. There it is. So, Volume 1, not sure how long the Black Swordsman is, but the Black Swordsman is the first arc of the series, so I'm going to go down with that one, because as you can see where my little bookmark is, it takes about that much of the book. I might actually go past it, but regardless, I'm not going to be reviewing the whole thing in terms of story content in this video. So the Black Swordsman starts off with Guts, the main character, having sex with a demon, as you can see, and the demon says, "Oh, I've got you. You've given into the pleasures of the flesh, and I'm going to eat you alive." And Guts says, "No, I knew that was going to happen," and he blows her head off. Right at the beginning, I mean, that's the first thing you open to, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be some story. So we get into it, and he's roaming around, very mysterious character, and it starts off right away. You get into a medieval town, the setting is established, everything about this book is established right away, And while you're left with questions, the questions aren't about what am I reading, it's more like, where are they going to go with this? So he goes into this town, very mysterious, he's wearing a cloak, very, very well illustrated cloak, into this town, obviously, and he finds a bunch of drunks playing darts with a little fairy, or they actually call them elves in this, teasing the poor thing, and he comes in unwarranted, pulls out a crossbow, and, well, he just starts lighting the place up. Starts shooting all these guys all over the place. They're getting real frustrated, and they decide to fight back. So Guts, being very subtle, nonchalant, and caring, inadvertently saves the elf, and kills a bunch of these thugs and hooligans, right? Drawing his sword, and this is a trope that we're about to see when I turn the page, that runs throughout the entire book, and I'm assuming throughout the entire series at this point. And when I first turn the page, I don't usually react very much to things in general. I'm not a very reacting person, even when I am getting into a story. But every single time that Guts would chop somebody in half with the sword, I audibly gasped, because either it would be a large splash page that you wouldn't be expecting, and even if you were expecting it, the way that Miura was able to illustrate the composition and the flow into the slice was always so seamless and so big, and it gave you the speed, the power, everything about it, and the shock value that comes with it every single time, because he always found a new way to do it. And every single time that you think, oh, I'm gonna get tired of people getting chopped, and you don't. You just don't. It doesn't get boring. It's always exciting whenever Guts chops somebody in half, even if you know it's coming, because that's kind of his thing after a certain point. So, yeah, as you can see, the book is off to a really big, larger-than-life start, and Guts finally reveals what he wants. He wants to meet with, he wants them to tell everybody that he's the Black Swordsman. It's been a while since I've read this, so forgive me if I missed some story beats. But because he saved the elf says, hey, you saved me. Now I'm your buddy. And we get the obligatory, this character doesn't talk that much, but this character is super cheerful. I was worried about that trope as well, because there are a lot of tropes that are introduced in this series that you see in all media, especially Japanese manga and anime. The cheerful character, you can already hear his voice, you can already hear the way that he acts. But Miura, as a writer and as an illustrator, is able to take tropes that you'd see pretty much everywhere and make them good. Because it's not just about the trope, it's not always about what it is, it's about how they're written, how they're portrayed, and how it's executed. And Miura always finds a way in these arcs to make something tropey something good. So he alerts everybody to the Black Swordsman. Of course, all of the knights come and capture him, which he was half expecting, and they begin to torture him. And Guts, hung up, tortured, everything like that. He's not even making noise. He's not flinching, he's not reacting. And they call in this priest, who seems to be the leader of the town, to talk to Guts. And Guts is pretty much talking down to this guy, saying, oh, you're just getting ruled by this evil overlord, you don't stand for anything, and, I mean, you're just a puppet, you're nothing. Let me out of here, I'll go kill him, and that's that, right? The priest is like, oh, no, you can't understand. And while we're looking at this, the dialogue in the book it's pretty solid, it's passable for English. I know that there are a lot of problems in translations sometimes whenever they're translating manga, but in this case I think that they did a pretty good job at the translation. Guts doesn't talk very much as a protagonist, and he also doesn't have a lot of internal dialogue as a protagonist, which you see a lot in American comics, and even in manga as well. You'll see the whole, they explain the entire thing through exposition as you're reading some fight scene. Guts doesn't do that. When he talks, he says what he needs to say, and it speaks to the ability of Miura to illustrate and write simultaneously, that you don't need that internal dialogue going on. You don't need Guts to tell you what he's thinking in little thought bubbles here and there. You don't need people explaining to you what's happening, because Miura is so good at illustrating that you think what the characters are thinking. You're very immersed in the story. That's one thing that throughout the entire 500, 600 page book, which, by the way, I had to pace myself. I didn't want to read the whole 500 pages in one sitting, so I had to stop in between it and pace it out because it was so interesting. I wanted to continue to read the monsters, the development, the stories. It's not even that they were so unique, but they were so well told and well illustrated that it was hard not to want to read more from an artistic perspective and a writing perspective as well. So we get the priest, and he meets one of the first kind of evil villains that we're going to find, and they tell them about the Black Swordsman. And in this scene, it doesn't show much of his face. It shows the fangs. You know the guy is evil. It's at night. He's very in shadow. And you cut to these very large, dramatic, for lack of a better word, set pieces that all add something to the story. Because you could have dramatic for the sake of dramatic, and a lot of people misinterpret things in media where they think, oh, people really like that this was dark, so let's make it dark. No, it was dark, but it worked because it was well written. There was substance to it. Like Watchmen. A lot of people want to try to be the next Watchmen, the next Alan Moore, but they missed the point of why Watchmen worked. It wasn't just character deconstruction. It was good writing. Everything in there had substance. If you go back and reread that book, I know this is a bit of a tangent, but if you reread Watchmen, there are little bits and pieces in the very beginning of the book that pay off at the very end. And they're just what would otherwise be throwaway pieces of dialogue that are brought up at the very last issue of the story. So these dramatic set pieces, the caricatures sometimes that they'll create or that Miura will illustrate, they come in handy. They are substantial and they do work to tell a certain idea, because what is art other than expression of ideas visually, right? And despite it being a black and white medium, not only does the black and white medium of manga suit the story very well, but Miura is such an expert and a master in illustrating with it, especially with the screen tones, as you'll see in some later pages. That's all he needs. He only needs black and white to get across what he wants to tell you. And so as we continue, we get more of this evil villain. And this is something about Guts. We find that he's tortured, he's beaten, he's battered, and now he's kind of thinking out loud. He's like, where am I? I can't move. And you can tell he's laid out on the floor. He's in a very nasty place, but he sees this thing. So far in the story, we haven't seen Guts express any semblance of emotion whatsoever, but he sees this little fetus, pig fetus thing, and he starts to freak out. Visibly, he's scared of it. I mean, he's reacting to it, and all of a sudden the elf comes back in, and Guts is like, okay. He snaps back into reality, and he was just dreaming. So as this thing comes around, he says, I'm gonna free you, and Guts gets touched by this little guy, and he flips out on him. Again, the character doesn't express any emotion, all of a sudden these little bits and pieces start freaking him out. And the cool thing about that is that it illustrates, without being said, that despite Guts' very unassuming personality, his very calm outward expression, something's going on here, that he's snapping like this. When even whenever he's killing guys, whenever he's trapped, being tortured, none of that makes him react, but these very simple things do. That's what you call substance. That's what you call building the story and showing without telling, right? Because that's what you should do in comics. You should show, not tell. So the elf heals him up, and he's being a jerk to the elf as he is. They reveal this scar on his back that they yet to figure out what it is. And eventually Guts is healed up, and he gets up. One thing that you'll notice, his right eye is always closed. It's assumed that it's gone, right? So he's getting ready to get out of here and kill that guy that he wants. But the elf, being an empath, starts to feel all these wretched emotions coming off of Guts, despite, again, his unassuming exterior. Which, a little bit tropey, but it builds to the story. You start to wonder more about Guts as a character, and the way that he's building relationships with a lot of the characters around him, as limited as they are. So he comes out, the scar on his neck starts bleeding. Obviously, that's a sign that somebody's coming for him. And boom, you get this nice shot of all the horses trampling people. And the fight is on, right? They're killing people, they're slaughtering people. And it's just terrible. Until Guts finally gets out and he starts doing the slaughtering. He kills all of these knights, all these people with absolutely no remorse until he has to take on the big bad. He just lit him up with arrows. Everybody thinks, oh, what's he gonna do? So he starts this big fight. And in the setting, you have a burning town behind him. And we finally get to see more of Guts' personality and more of the vengeance taking hold as he's getting bodied by this massive, what we learn to be is an apostle, the demon. So he's fighting him left and right, doing things that people were all scared of. And we finally get to see his actual form. He's this big, giant snake creature. That, I mean, look at that. It's grotesque, it's weird, it's medieval, it checks off all the boxes, it's really well illustrated, and Guts has to fight this thing as a human being, right? All the men have never seen it. It almost looks goofy here, and they run off, and the comedic relief is also like, okay, this is a little bit too crazy. And so we get this massive fight with really well done cross-hatching, really well done line work, where Guts is getting thrashed around, he's coughing up blood. The guy's dying. Now, again, I don't know anything about the series. I've only read this book here. Is Guts human? I feel like he can't be human with all that blood that he's coughing up and all that death he's experiencing. So as he's about to get killed, he pulls out a win by blasting this guy with his Iron Man arm, grabbing his sword, and chopping him in half. Because of course he would. And what better way to finish a villain like this than to chop him in half? And you can see all the rage in him, the dirt, the blood, all of this just terrible battle-worn scars that he's wearing on him as the book goes on. As you can tell, I'm very into this book and illustrations, and he just looks psycho here, like as though he's the villain. And one thing that I learned, not only by his illustration of setting and understanding of the environment that he's trying to build with the characters, Miura, that is, Guts turns into kind of a maniac, where he was taunting him about his humanity, and he says, well, now you're going to know what it's like to be human. So he starts lighting him up with arrows and hurting him as much as he can with this just psycho look on his face, where he wants to inflict as much pain upon this guy as he possibly can. And it gives you a really grotesque look into somebody who's so damaged, and you don't know why just yet. You're interested, you keep on wondering. It sets up so many things that you want answered, that he's just showing you by the way that he illustrates their expressions or their actions, or the way they treat other characters, which goes back into the actions. And he asks him where the God Hand is, setting up future villains, and he says, I don't know, it's not for us to know. So he just continues to leave him to die. He leaves him in this burning building. It collapses on him. You just see pure agony and terror on all of their faces. And once again, while he's begging for his life being burned to death, the poor little elf gets a feeling of what's in Guts' soul and just can't bear it, because there's so much turmoil in there. And we get the end of the book with this beautiful, beautiful shot of Guts walking off, putting his sword away, and something that Miura does really well in the silhouette, because Guts only has one eye, he only does one white silhouette in the eye, which I think is pretty cool. Miura would be a really good Batman artist. But that's the end of the arc here, and he's like, oh, he went berserk. So the credits roll, that's where the series ends. I'm kidding. And you ends with this great shot of him cloaked up, leaving behind complete chaos and destruction. And so that's the end of the Black Swordsman arc, I believe, because this is the start to, if I'm not mistaken, the Brand arc. So that's the end of that arc. It's already a 20-minute video. But yeah, I mean, it's a really, really packed story where some of the panels, you might get a lot of double-page spreads, you might get a lot of 3-panel per pages, but the storytelling the illustration, the pacing, everything about it, it's good. I mean, I can only think of good things to say about it. And the way that he builds and fleshes out the handful of characters that he introduces in just the first arc alone, in building the setting, building the world, and making you want to continue to read by offering questions and making the questions seem interesting by the way the characters are acting and the way that he illustrates it. Because sometimes you might just want to see what the character's going to do next, or what cool image is going to be on the next page. I mean, here he is chopping a horse and a dude in half at the same time with this psycho smile on his face. It's a very interesting book. It's obviously not for everybody, but if you're into violence and very dark, and I'd say meaningful and suspenseful storytelling, this is definitely for you. So that was the Black Swordsman, the Black Swordsman arc. If it's not already obvious, this is definitely a recommend that you should go check it out. It is $50, which could probably hurt. It definitely is a lot of money, but for the size, the literal size, it's bigger than my hand, which most books are, and the quantity of pages and the quality, not only of the book itself, but of the substance that the book has, the story, the artwork, I'd say it's worth it, especially if you want to get into something new, something different that you haven't seen before, because honestly, I haven't seen anything like Berserk ever. So yeah, definitely check it out if you have the opportunity. I'll be reviewing the other arcs in the book, spacing them out in future videos that I'll be making. I'll probably put some more JoJo in between that, and maybe some comics, or just fight talk as well. This is a very versatile channel. But until then, don't forget, go buy these stickers. They're great. Again, you could put them on your car, you could put them on a baby, you could put them on a laptop, a phone, anything that you want. Just go buy them and check out my Instagram at @TheBatOtter. Until then, I'll see you later.